So in this mimer, he's really repeating what he said in the Tanya, but in a much stronger sense. In the Tanya, he starts out with defining what a tzaddik is, and he says we thought until now that a tzaddik is somebody who has more good deeds than bad deeds. He does a lot of mitzvahs. That's how we understood. Comes the Tanya, and he writes the Tanya in 1797. And in it, he suddenly has this new thesis that a tzaddik is not. It's true that it's also somebody who. That's also, but there he calls it a shema mushal. It's a borrowed connotation. The real meaning of a tzaddik is somebody who doesn't have a Yetzer Hara. Now, we're in 1811. He comes and he says, it's much more than that. It's not just that the tzaddik is somebody, like I told you before in the Tanya, that there are two types of tzaddikim, and the second type, they're called the Nunayama, they're the tzaddikim of the Zohar. They're the ones who are fish in the sea. And why do we call them fish in the sea? Because they're constantly contemplating the hidden worlds. It's like they're swimming in the concealed reality of the sea, which symbolizes the hidden worlds. And they're the tzaddikim. and everything that you knew about Torah, they suddenly play with in such a way that you don't know where you are. It's sort of like you lose your bearings. What is it like? It's like filling yourself with laughter. Shashwim. It's fun and games. What's the closest thing to this that I can tell you? Tinokot shel Beit Rabban. It's like little children first learning Torah, and they say all kinds of strange things, all kinds of nonsense, if you want. And in the beginning, when you hear the tzaddik, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like they're talking nonsense. What are you saying? How can you play with the words this way? That's not what they mean. So where else do you feel this? You feel, and again he says the tzaddikim are the Leviathan that God is playing with the second set of 3 hours of the day before mincha time.
But that does not necessarily negate what he wrote in Tanya.
No, it goes further. I'm saying it's building on what he said in the Tanya.
And it doesn't necessarily apply to all tzaddikim at all times. What's in the Tanya, which is the Bible of Chabad, is a classic, all-ending, never-ending, everlasting definition of a tzaddik. This is something different. This is like a side definition. This is for a unique few.
Okay. I see how you're understanding it. I'm understanding it exactly the opposite. What he said in the Tanya, that was to explain the Beinoni. The whole discussion there of the tzaddik is is secondary.
So we've got Sefer Shel Tzaddikim now.
Can. No, that I've always said. I don't remember if you've heard me say this, but I've said many times something that I heard, and it's not just, it's written. The Tanya is a transitionary book.
Yeah.
It's why it's called intermediates, because it's really also in the middle.
We never had a Sefer Shel Tzaddikim.
And everything that he wrote after the Tanya is of a different caliber and of a different mindset. It's a completely different mindset. You remember, the Tanya also started as Maimarim that he said, but he didn't say it as Maimarim. He said it as short things that he developed into a whole picture of the time. But the Tanya was really collected over 20 years. There were the collections of shorter writings that he had distributed and slowly were collected together. That's why it's called Likutei Amarim, because it's a collection of his sayings. But here, this is very thought out. This is like, it's like he's telling us, look, there's coming a time when your whole definition of tzaddik is going to change. Don't worry, I'm not talking about the Beinoni, that you're a Beinoni. I'm talking about who are you going to learn from. So it's true that a lot of people still go to people who they think are tzaddikim because they don't miss minyan, and because they're like that. That's a tzaddik. Tzaddik. But he says the real tzaddikim, the ones that are the tzaddikim of the future, are these ones that they stay at home. You don't necessarily see them. And the chayus that they bring down, the life force that they bring down through their Torah. And not necessarily through their mitzvahs. again, if you look at the Rebbe, so the Rebbe said, no, we're not there yet. Because I have to build a whole army of people whose singular mission in life is to get people to do mitzvahs.
You've just dissolved the Torah mitzvahs in a bowl of salt water. It doesn't exist anymore.
Why?
Because all they're going to do is sit and have a learn Torah.
Now, of course they do mitzvahs, but that's not their main
Absolutely.
thing. That's not their main thing. Of course they do mitzvahs. But again, this goes in line with the notion that the Rebbe also talked about, that eventually you can't command anymore. The mitzvot betelot latid lavo. And the people understood that means that mitzvahs will no longer be done.
I understood that completely differently. I understood that when Mashiach comes, we'll be like Avraham and Yitzchak.
Okay,
And
that's what the
do all
Rebbe
these
said. We
things
talked about
because,
this. I don't know if you understood it from me, but
Hmm?
that's how the Rebbe explains it. The Rebbe explains that what it means is not that the mitzvahs won't be done, won't be performed, rather they won't be an obligation.
Right, just like Pesach is not going to disappear, but Pesach
Right,
is going to appear to be insignificant.
And the truth is, in a certain sense, we're already there. Okay? The Rebbe didn't think that people should say you're not obligated, but he also didn't think that people should say you're obligated.
And where's the Beis Hamikdash if we're there? This is-
No, I'm saying in terms of keeping the mitzvahs, there's no definite order in all these things. But in a certain
The Rebbe
sense,
didn't say that he's not going to encourage, love Jews who don't keep Torah and mitzvahs.
Mhm.
But that didn't mean so that he negated
I
them.
just said, he didn't say you're not obligated, but on the other hand, he never taught anybody to say, look, if you don't do this, you're obligated, you'll go to hell.
The Rebbe had a totally different approach.
Right,
The
right.
Rebbe said if you want to get chesed from Kodesh Baruch Hu, so there's certain mitzvahs which are
Oh,
good for you to
Oh, exactly.
do. He put it
Into the positive.
sweet coated, saccharine colored.
Something like that. And again, there are people who hear this and they go bazonkers. They go nuts. What are you talking about? There's a guy standing in front of a bus who's kind of going to come, turn him into pulp. And you're talking about I should give him a candy to get out of the street? They go nuts when they hear this. Because that's how they see mitzvahs. They see mitzvahs as an obligation, and if you don't do it, you're in trouble. But that's not... Okay. But because this is a physical reality, our reality now is physical. לכן צריך לצדיקים שעבודתם בגשמיות לקיים מצוות מעשיות.
Reality. It doesn't say that.
This world.
It says this world
Good.
is
This
Gashmi.
world is
Who
this
says that
reality.
This is reality.
Because that's how I translate this world. This reality. Okay? When you say Ha'olam Hazeh, what do you mean? Earth? As opposed to when we're going to go live on Mars.
At the moment,
we're stuck in the world. So, לכן צריך לצדיקים שעבודתם בגשמות לקיים מצוות מעשיות. וזהו שאמור הז"ל, עמוד אחד בצדיק שמו שעליו עומד העולם, וכל מה שיש ביבשה יש בים, כי באמת צריך להיות הא והא. So in the present reality, because it's a physical reality, we need tzaddikim who also perform the mitzvos. Physical mitzvos.
מה זה הווה?
This and this.
Referring to?
Leviathan and Behemoth. We need the tzaddikim that are seeped in the concealed world, whose existence is to bring the infinite down through their Torah learning, and specifically through their Torah learning of the Zohar and the Chassidus. And we also need tzaddikim who bring the infinite down through their physical actions. Yeah?
By the way, you know who was the greatest Lamed Vogel, the most people of all hidden tzaddikim in this generation? Was the Rebbe.
You're saying in terms of mitzvahs masios.
No, in terms of he was a hidden tzaddik because nobody knew really what he was.
Oh
doing.
yeah, how he learned was. You can see from his father what kind of. His father was certainly the one in the generation before that nobody knew. He wasn't well known. Because the way in which the tzaddikim, that are like the fish of the sea, the way they carry themselves is wondrous and very exalted. It's not like anything that we are aware of. I said they're hidden. כמו על דרך משל הצדיקים ששתים בים, כך הם שתים וטיסה אחת מגיעה למעלה מעלה. In the same way that the fish are like birds in the ocean, their fins are like wings, and so they fly from one end of the world to the other. The same way, these tzaddikim, in one swoop of their wings, meaning one moment, usually the wings are related to the Ava and Yira, to love and fear. They go in one swoop all the way up to the heavens to see. And it's much greater than the service of the tzaddikim that do things physically. For instance, that they know how to eat on Yontiv, and they get joy out of eating the meat on Yontiv. But that's a lower level, he says. But the way in which the Leviathan type tzaddikim, the ones who are like fish in the sea, the ones who are steeped in the concealed tradition, that in one swoop they reach the highest spiritual levels. I understand, that's where I was wrong. That the fins here, the wings here, are not love and fear. At least not love and fear in the heart. If anything, they're the love and fear in the mind. Because they're cold, he says. The one who works very hard, you see him work hard, doing a mitzvah, you see how he davens, how he does everything. It's all very intense. And you see the retichat adamim, you see the boiling of the blood. And here the boiling of the blood is a good thing, because it's boiling away the negative. It's boiling away the klipa. So those types of tzaddikim, they're very hot. Okay, but those are the ones that are on the land. And like you said before, everything that's in the sea, there's also in the land. So there's tzaddikim in the ocean, and there's tzaddikim, as it were, on land. So the ones on land, for them, it's all through the boiling of the blood. But the ones who are in Torah, in the concealed tradition, they're not like that. On the contrary, the krirut damim uvenachat, they have cold blood, like fish. And they're all very calm, very quiet, like in the ocean, very quiet. And that's why in one moment, they can reach the highest levels. And I can't explain in words how this works. That's why Rabbi Shimon, whose Yortzei will celebrate in 3.5 weeks, that's why when he was in the cave, he didn't do many of the obligatory physical mitzvos. Rather, he performed everything in his mind, which is higher than, for instance, having joy from the meat eaten on Yontiv. וזהו עניין סנפיריו של הלוויתן שבהם מושט מן הקצה, ולכן העולם כולו עומד על לוויתן שמקיף כל העולם כנודע בדברי רז"ל. And that's why the Leviathan has fins. So, like I said, there are fins. There is Ava and Yira, but it's in the mind. So, in a sense, it's cold. And that's what the sages describe in Bava Basra and Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer and in the Zohar, that the Leviathan, which most people would call the whale, so he circles the earth, which is true. That's what they all do. They're able to circle the earth. So again, that fact.
Not kosher.
Okay, so that's why it's probably not them. But whatever it is.
And I don't think you could shecht a whale.
No, you can't. You can only use it for oil.
I'm saying not physically. I don't think you could kill a whale by shechting it.
No, because they're mammals.
So if it's a mammal, it should have a veshit.
It does.
And you should be able to shecht it. But
you can't because it's not kosher.
No.
It's like shechting a...
If you wanted to kill it, you wanted to end it.
You take it out of the water, it dies.
I don't think a whale dies out of the water.
Of course it does. It takes a little bit longer than a fish, but it dies. Beached whales, that's the whole thing. They have to bring them back into the water in
Whales
12 hours, or they don't.
Whales and fish, mammals and fish at the same time.
They're different species for us, but or different whatever they call it, phylum. I don't know. But in terms of their life, it works the same way. They can't live outside the water. So, anyway, getting back to the point, I shouldn't have tried to get into the taxonomy of the whole thing. The Leviathan, whatever it is. So the Leviathan is described as circling the entire world, and that's exactly the idea behind these tzaddikim. ולעתיד הלוויתן יעשה מלחמה עם שור הבר וישחטנו בסנא פיריו. And eventually you're going to see a war, a game, between the two types of tzaddikim.
War games.
Okay. These are games. These are gladiator games. So you have to understand that there's a gladiator game even in Kedusha.
Was this the Chassidim against the Misnagdim?
Something like that. Is it really the Misnagdim? I don't know. And by the Misnagdim, there's also people like this.
Like what?
Whose entire life is in their contemplation. They also learn Chabad. the Misnagdische Chassidim, I'll call them, the ones who know Pnimius Torah. So their whole objection is to the Minagei Chabad. Their objection isn't to the Torah. They all learn the Torah because how can you miss out? If you have half a brain and you read something from the Alter Rebbe, you realize that if you're not going to learn this, you're going to be lacking 1,000-fold. What?
Miss out.
Yeah, how could you? If you're just even a normal human being that reads it, you realize what's going on here. It's something completely at a high, different level. So the biggest snagid in this sense was Rabbi Moshe Shapira, but he learned all of Chabad. He just said, don't become a Lubavitcher. That was his thing.
Who was this Shapira?
He passed away already. He passed away a couple years ago.
Who was he?
Who was he? He was their mashpia, if you want. You should hear his classes. Very interesting. They're all based on the Alter Rebbe. But again, he has his world. And read even the Wikipedia article on him. Very interesting what they have there. There's a whole site now. I can't remember what it's called. Hamakor, I think, or something like that. I can find it for you. That has all his classes. There's a lot of them. They're all very, very interesting. And he deciphers symbols the same way that the Alter Rebbe does, the same way that we do in Chabad. And he uses the same principles. Everything is the same. But in practice, he always told, because people came and asked him, since you're learning, because people who knew, he realized he's not making this up. He's taking it from somewhere. So they found out that he's taking it from Chabad. So they asked him, so why not be Lubavitch? He says, no, only the Torah. You can't touch the Chassidus itself is a treif. Don't touch it.
Why? What was wrong with the Chassidus?
In any case, in the future, the Leviathan will battle with the behemoth, Mshor Habal. Here you see that he already calls him Mshor Habal instead of behemoth, the wild ox. And he will shecht him with his fins. Because the worldly tzaddikim, the ones that are in the mundane and the physical world, and the physical reality, who do mitzvos, whose thing is to do a mitzvah with chayus, with a lot of life, they're called Shor Habal. They're called the wild ox. Pnei Shor Masmol, and they're from the left side of the divine chariot. Elashu bar v'zach, but he's very wild and he's pristine. כי הנה גם עבודתם במעשה גשמיות כמו ושמחת בחגיך דיום טוב ואין שמחה לבבשר אינו כפשוטו שיאכל בשר השור למלות בטנו חס ושלום ויסיס בו אלא בחינת העלאות. So when they eat meat on Yom Tov, it's not that they're eating to satiate themselves, to fill their stomachs. That's not what they're interested in. They have the mitzvah. They eat in order to elevate things. Kinyan shalmei simcha, in the same way that in the time of the temple, when somebody brought a shlamim, and somebody brought a peace offering, so the owner of the offering had to eat part of it. It was a mitzvah. You said a special bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekidshanu v'tzedakah v'tzivanu ala zevach. You make a bracha on eating, apart from shalkol that you would eat on the meat. Say another bracha for eating from a korban, from a sacrifice. But the whole point was that by eating, you're completing the elevation of the smell, the fragrance that goes up to God. But again, it has two parts to it. It has to go on the altar, whatever it has to go on the altar, like we read today in today's Chumash. And you also had to eat from it. So both parts were la Hashem, were for God. And the same thing when we eat from flesh on Yom Tov, when we eat meat on Yom Tov, we say Yismechu B'cha. The simcha is in you, God, in you specifically. But it's a request, because why is it a request? Because there's no Beis Mikdash. We can't do it as a korban. We can't do it as a sacrifice. So if it's not a sacrifice, Hashem has to do the work. It's not like we do the work, because we don't have the work. Avoda means work. So we don't have the work to do. So he has to do everything from his side. That's why he's called the wild ox, because Baal also means clean. Anything that's wild is like natural. So you're saying that he's clean. Bar levav, he has a clean heart. Pirush basar zachuval, like clean and pristine meat. Meaning that the joy that these types of tzaddikim that do worldly mitzvot, they receive, is from the heat, the excitement that they have from doing the mitzvah. But still, as much as they do, it's considered to be something minor. Okay? These tzaddikim on the land, these land-bound tzaddikim, the ones that do only mitzvahs. And there's nobody who only does mitzvah, but whose major concentration is on how they do their tish, for instance. Okay? That's the main thing. Because the tish is a physical thing. It's something that you show people. It's not something you're doing in your closet. What? Davening Shemini, you see them work. You see the work. The Rebbe, you never saw working when he davened. It was almost like a machine talking. You know how he davened. You heard him daven. It's like he's shooting the words out. Not shooting them like shooting them, but it's like they come out at a constant pace. He never lets down. There was a time, especially the year that after my father passed away, that I had to go for the teva every morning. So I found that it was the only way I could survive was just by saying it in a monotone. Because I wanted to say every word. I saw that that's what he does. When he was a yortzeit on Vav Tishrei for his mother, you heard him say every word, or almost every word. So I saw that only with a monotone could I. It was also a matter of how long it takes, because if you try to do it a little up and down, it takes you longer.
And then you have no meaning in that, because
Right, because everybody can't wait that long. So what I'm saying is that the Rebbe wanted people to look in the siddur when they're davening. So it's a big deal. What do you mean? Why would you look in the siddur? Nobody looks in the siddur when they daven. Everybody davens by heart. Because you find that it's harder to... For me, it's harder to have intent when I look at the words. I have to work extra hard. If I have to look at the word and at the same time try to feel something, it's much harder. At least for me.
Does it make it easier?
No, it makes it much harder. For me, it makes it much, much harder. But when I'm with my eyes closed, I'm looking like this, it's the easiest thing. Because then I can also, I from a young age, I don't know where I got the idea from, but that later I saw it in books. Maybe I got it first from books, I don't remember. From a young age, when I daven with my eyes closed, I see the words in front of me anyway. But when I draw them in front of me, like in my mind's eye, the feeling just comes naturally, and the intent comes with it. And I'm not limited. I feel it can expand as much as it wants. But when I try to follow his directive, which is to look in the siddur, so I feel it becomes monotonous. To have intent, to mean beyond to say the word, meaning to have some kind of feeling,
Takes a long time.
takes a much longer time when I look in the siddur. But I think that's exactly what he's saying here. That when you're mindful, when you're working with your mind, mindful is the wrong word, but when you're a tzaddik who's working in the mind, like the Rebbe, I think it's the easiest thing to follow. For them, it's the easiest thing in the world, to just follow the words. Because the mind works much faster than the heart. That's the main point. The heart, every time, it's almost like the difference between electricity and a combustion engine. Yeah. Electricity is instantaneous. A combustion engine or anything, like you want to heat up, it takes time to heat up. You have to add fire, and it takes a long time but once you get it going, it's great. But the electricity is instantaneous, like turning a light on versus turning heat on. The light is instantaneous, because the light is like the mind. The mind is instantaneous. That's what he's saying here. You can fly from one end of the world to the other end in a moment. But when you try to do things with your heart because you want to feel them, it's much harder. It's a lot of work, and so he says that's why it's a minor thing compared to what these tzaddikim who work with the mind can do. The one who's working with his heart, with his emotions, is moving very slowly in the end. Because in the end it's coming from limited things, from physical things. But these other the tzaddikim that work in the sea, okay, the ones that are like the fish of the sea, the Leviathan, they move at infinite speeds. And therefore the Leviathan will shecht the pristine wild ox.
Why, he's going to catch him? He goes faster than him?
What?
He's stronger than him?
He's greater. He's much greater. What does it mean? All shechting is to elevate something. Okay? All shechting. When he says he's going to shecht him with his fin, stop thinking about shechting as he's going to kill him. He's not going to kill him.
He's going to elevate him.
He's going to elevate him. En v'shachat ela umashach. Okay? The Rebbe repeats this in dozens of letters, dozens of opportunities. That when you say the shecht, the Gemara says in Chulin, when you shecht, it's to pull. That's what it means. Umashach. What does it mean to umashach? To elevate. That's what you're doing. By a physical animal, it means to slaughter it. Sedom, but here we're not talking about a physical animal, because the Leviathan and the wild ox, they don't represent animals. They represent tzaddikim. So obviously one's not going to shecht the other. That's exactly how the Rebbe explained Rav and Reb Zera. Right? What did he say? He shechted him. What do you mean shechted him? He told him such a tremendous chiddush in the Megillah that his soul departed from his body. It was like he was beside himself. He couldn't come back to this world. He said, why would I want to be in this world after I've heard Torah like this? That's called shechting. So he's shechting with his fin. Why his fin? Because his fin, again, is his ability to travel from one end of the world to the other in a moment's notice. And that'll show to the shorabal, he'll show it to the ox, to the regular tzaddik. In other words, well, what's going to happen here? You have somebody who's a genius, who's a tzaddik in the concealed tradition. And you're going to have all these very important rabbis, the chief rabbi and this rabbi and that rabbi, who don't know very much about it. And he's going to speak to them for 20 minutes. And at the end, they're all going to be... They're going to be besides themselves. They're going to say, well, what is this? What are we doing here? Give this man the leadership. That's what's going to happen. Because he's going to take them to such a high level that they didn't imagine that Yiddishkeit could even reach there. They didn't imagine that a human being could be there. But it's not going to come from that he's going to show them how well he does the lulav. It's not going to be that his kavanas and the lulav are going to be so amazing. No, he's going to speak to them. But what he's going to speak to them is going to be such a tremendous revelation for them that they'll be beside themselves. And they all admit, this is the Mashiach. This is who he is. That's what the Rambam also said about the Mashiach, right? That he's Gadol mi Moshe Rabbeinu b'Nevuah. That he's greater than even the Moshe Rabbeinu in wisdom and in prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ach be'emet, gam shor habar ya'aleh et haleviatan. But don't think that this is not mutual. Because really, the ox, the pristine ox, the wild ox, will also elevate the Leviathan. Why? Because in one aspect, the regular tzaddikim, the regular rabbis, they also have one up on the Mashiach, on this figure who's like a Leviathan. In the end, the Torah says that mitzvos are practical, they're physical. And in that, he knows how to do it better than the concealed figure, than this figure of the concealed tzaddik. He does know how to do things better because he's had a lot of practice. He knows. And so he will elevate, he will teach this special figure, the special figure called the tzaddikim that are like the fish of the sea, will teach him how to do the mitzvos. וזה הרי הקדוש ברוך הוא לעתיד לבוא לצדיקים כללות עבודתם בהאי עלמא ששניהם כאחד טובים בהאי עדיף ובהאי עדיף. And so then the Almighty will show them both that they're both needed. That he needs both of them. He needs these concealed tzaddikim and he needs these revealed tzaddikim. He needs the ones that are dealing with the concealed world and the ones that are dealing with the revealed world. And each one has a Maila, it has a superior advantage over the other in a different aspect. עוד יש לומר, הגה, שנקרא שור הבר, דרך ורב תבואות בכך שור. ומימי לא קראתי שורי שורי אלו שורי שדי. התורה נקראת ראשית תבואתו, וכל זה נמשך בכוח שור, כן נקראו צדיקים אלו, על שם שור הבר. So it's another reason why they're called the wild ox, because the wild ox is used to plow the field. And in fact, the Gemara says, I don't remember who this was. Who was this? I don't remember who this was. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan. Then he never called his ox an ox, he called it my field. Why? Because they're so connected. Because the ox is what plows the field. What's the field? The field is Torah. And so in a certain sense, they know more Torah than even these concealed tzaddikim. Why? Because they're plowing the Torah all the time. Plowing the Torah is like that they go through, I don't know, 100 blot of Gemara every day. Okay? Because that's what they do every day, every single day. Because like the Rogachover was asked the question, they were very impressed by his answers. Like he learned it this morning. And so somebody said, he did learn it this morning. That's exactly what he did. Why? Because he goes over 1,000 blot of Gemara every day. That's his genius. So there they also have a Maila. They have something more, and that's why they're called Shorabal. They're called the wild ox. We also mentioned before that these tzaddikim are the ones that are called the foundation of the world. That they connect the heavens and the earth together. The other type of tzaddik is just in the heavens. He's not really here. And that's like Yosef the tzaddik, when he who's called, right, the ox. So we see that they run the world like Yosef. So that's Mashiach ben Yosef. So really what he's... What?
He fed the whole world.
Okay, he takes care of the whole world. So really what he's just described is that the tzaddikim that are like land tzaddikim, they're like Mashiach ben Yosef. And the tzaddikim that are like concealed tzaddikim, they're like Mashiach ben David.
Can't be both.
For the Rambam there, he is both. The Mashiach will be both. והנה הלוויתן ישחוט את שור הבר בסנפיריו, אף שכיום השחיטה כזו פגומה, גמורה, היא מחמת ההפסק. The reason why shechting, now we're turning back into the parable. So in the parable, he is shechting him with his fin. And today, we rule that shechting with a fin, because it's curved, is puzzle. It's not kosher. Why? So it says because the reason is like any shechita like this. It's called no, among the five. I don't remember what it's called. That you stop in the middle. Hefsek. I don't remember. It has a name. It has a technical name. Maybe he says here. But he says in the future there will have to be an hefsek. There will have to, meaning when you're shechting, there will have to be a stop in the middle. Why? כי עניין השחיטה הזו היא בחינת עליות השור עבר למעלה מעלה דעה לבידתם מעלהו בסנפיריו ולכן צריך להיות הפסק בינתיים שהרי אי אפשר להיות כל העלייה בבת אחת. Because in the meaning of the parable of raising these landlocked tzaddikim to a higher level, you can't do it all at once. You have to do it slowly, level by level. Otherwise, you get what happened to Rabbi Zera, the Imam Shnai. You don't want them to lose. They also might not be able to follow you. So you have to do it slowly, step by step. So for that reason, the slaughtering both the fin will be proper. Because each one of these levels has a name. It's called a chamber. The chamber of schus, meaning of how do you say a schus for somebody?
I forgot. It's not a
No. Schus means that I advocate for you. So it's like
schut.
Yeah.
I think it was
Schus. Yeah. Schus. So I advocate for you. And there's a heichal of ratzon, of will. So these are gvura and chesed in the Zohar. But you can't go through all the chambers all at once. When you're advancing spiritually, you have to make stops in each one of the chambers. And therefore, this type, again, in terms of the parable, this type of shechting, this type of slaughtering will be permitted with the stop in the middle. And then we see, and he doesn't explain this, that the wild ox will also gore the Leviathan with his horns. That's also something that's what he gets. Why do the horns represent physical mitzvahs? Because I said that's what he has to give him. He has to give him. So this he didn't explain. So it could be that in the Bi'ul, which we'll start seeing I guess tomorrow,
Yes, it is.
you might explain that. I don't remember that he does. But, Yofi.
8 o'clock, going for